Okay. And the question was
Sharia law and so on.
yeah, that's
right?
right.
Yes,
That's right.
yeah. I do believe that Malaysia may be getting more religiously conservative, uh, even though there are positive signs that more people are actually speaking up for a liberal and plural lifestyle. But let me put in the context first. I think the increasing Islamization in this country is very much the outcome of ethnic tension. In the 60s, in the 50s and the 60s, when the country was in its early years, um, the manifestations of ethnic competition or rivalry was in language. Because people see that whether or not to cleavage one language over the other would have enormous effect on your employability. It gives you a value if your native language become the national language or you get some sort of official recognitions. If it's suppressed, then of course that you'll be the loser. So for 20 or 30 years that has been the issue, and for the same nationalistic concern, the English language has been suppressed all the way until all the way until 90s, early 90s, when the trend was reversed. Now, by as the government implemented the Bumiputrism policy and so on, the Malay actually get much more affluent. Oh, by the way, they were all Muslim by provision of the constitution. That's Article 160. So they get more affluent with this with the implementations of the Bumiputrism policy, and many of them pick up English. So you go to the richest part of this city in Kuala Lumpur, and you find Malay people talking to you in English even when you ask them a question in Malay, because speaking English has over time becoming some sort of a class status. Now, as Malay language fade out as an ethnic marker, it poses a questions of like, how do we define us and them? And Islam come into place. I think this what people need to know, and do not put it and think that Islam, is a problematic faith or some sort, or is something negative. People shouldn't see Islam as something negative, because you have to look at just our neighbor Indonesia, which have a similar cultural background if you compare the native populations, but they employ a much more liberal attitude towards religion. Why? Because it was multi-ethnic. Because in Indonesia, while 90% of them were Islam, the ethnic conflict does not cut along the line of religion. So people don't need to emphasize that. But over here, because by definitions, all Malays have to be Muslim, and and they make up most of the Bumiputras, while most of the non-Malays are non-Muslim. This reinforcing cleavages created a bipolar society where you have two blocks who are constantly in competition and so on. I think that leads to the emphasis, the overly emphasis on religion. The good thing about this is that as the Malay communities become more affluent, when it becomes more affluent, more Malays are actually speaking up. Malay Muslims are speaking up for pluralism. So you have now, among one of my activist colleagues, Dr. Farooq Musa, who openly call for secular state, who argue that secular state is the best for the development of Islam and other faiths and so on. So this is something increasingly important.
Now, let's come back to the word corruption. Now, is corruption a word that is being redefined or defined in Malaysia? Because many have seen that there is also cases of electoral fraud,
Yeah.
and also cases where corruption is seen as a religion because of the Islamic teaching. Is that true? And could you elaborate on that?
No, certainly I think that's very unfair to think that Islam condones corruptions. Some of the most uncorrupt politicians in Malaysia happen to be Muslim as well. I think when you come to issues like corruption, you have to see that that's something that cut across the board. You find people who are corrupt in any faith or a cultural background. You find people who are clean from any cultural or religious background as well. What is important is indeed that I think we have a very powerful state, and so a powerful state allow many people to pose obstacle to others people who want to get things done, and in a way that so these people can actually create you extra trouble. For example, you want to apply for a business license and for some sort of approval for whatever your business project, and if you do the correct way, you do the formal way, you hand in your application and so on, it may take months for the document to travel around before you get an answer. And to fasten that process, you probably would put some money together, and you find that things get sorted out within a day or two. So that's how the problem is. You find in Malaysia what we call is the coffee money. We call bribery as the coffee money, and you do have police would sometimes stop you for breaking whatever traffic offences, traffic rules, and then hint at you and say that you should pay him some coffee money. So it is a problem, but I don't think it's fair to attribute it to anyone. And I think that as a country getting more politically conscious, many citizens, increasingly more citizens, are coming up and saying no to bribery. They would rather pay whatever fine than pay bribes to police or other law enforcement.
Now, how about the electoral fraud? There is some subject that has been brought up from time to time. Could you elaborate on that, on your experience?
Oh, sure. I think that unfortunately this is a country where the elections, when the electoral process and system are far from free and fair or clean. And you talk from things, I'll give you examples like one of the most common thing Malaysians complain about is what we call phantom voters. What does it mean? It means that people who have died but whose name remain on the electoral roll. Now if that's the entire case, this is just purely an academic issue. You merely have an inflated electorate and therefore a lower turnout percentage. But what happened is that some of these dead people who exist merely on paper did wake up from their grave and walk to polling station and cast their ballot instead of going home to visit their children and grandchildren. So you have people impersonating some dead people to cast their vote. So to dilute the vote of legitimate voters and to change the outcome of elections. So that's something very common. And you have other things like sometimes the term phantom voters has been extended to cover not only the dead people, but people who you never find them assisting in the place because they have some weird names appearing on that place or on the electoral. Or for example, you find a premise, maybe a single story house that have 50 voters registered under that address. You know well that it's impossible for 50 people to stay in the house. But these people exist on paper, and on that day, they would turn out and they cast their vote. So we do have a lot of problem with electoral. That's a very serious problem. But we have other problems as well, like for example, postal voting. That's designed, unfortunately not for everyone who have to be away. It's actually very restricted. If you're overseas, only civil servants, that's mean the diplomats and students and their spouses are eligible. If you are in the country, then it's mainly for the police and the soldiers and their spouses. Ordinary people, only when you get engaged on election day, then you're allowed to cast your vote. They don't care if your home happen to be 1,000 miles away or separated by the South China Sea, which keep West Malaysia and East Malaysia apart. They don't care about that. You don't have the right to vote. But the real problem with postal voting is that for the bulk of the postal voter who are militaries, personnel and soldier and police officer, police personnel, who are soldiers and police personnel. They often do not get a chance to cast their ballot because the ballot will be collected, and then whoever collect the ballots can actually go around and hand it in a few days later. So no one really know who actually cast the ballot. So that become a problem. A problem because a lot of times that you're talking about in a constituency where the opposition may have an advantage to win, then you find that they would relocate 2,000 military voters in that constituency, and most of these military voters would vote for the government, and the opposition of course will lose that seat. So you do have problems like this. You have problems in terms of multiple voting. People will turn up at different area going on. We have been asking for the government to have in-deliberating. It took us 5 years. They finally promised to give us that, but we wouldn't know whether this would actually happen at the end. We also have problems in the campaign process, whereby the government misuses its power to make a lot of offers to voters to ask for their votes. So when we have when one of our parliamentarians or state assembly person die, then you have by-election. Now, every time when you have by-election, you find that the road will be paved again with tars, whatever infrastructures that need fixed would get fixed very quickly. As if like you are encouraged to think, if you have a lot of trouble in your constituency, then may God take away the life of your representative, because then you have a by-election. Then all these things will get fixed. And rather than say you pay tax and therefore you're entitled to get whatever services and infrastructure you need, it becomes something conditional. Sometimes it's just that they throw it to you in the hope that you feel grateful to them. For those projects that happen very last minute, we call them instant noodle projects. It's like an Asian instant noodle. You cook and immediately get cooked. So it's very short term. But in other cases, these projects could be, or they give money on a conditional basis. It's practically wood buying. They would offer you, as this happened especially in the rural area in Sabah and Sarawak, where the indigenous people, the village head of the indigenous people may be called into the politician office, and he will be given a sum of money and ask him to go back and pass to every of his villagers and ask them to vote for the ruling coalition. So corruption does happen in many ways, and I happen to be a member of a coalition called Bersih, which is clean. We fight for, our full name is Coalition for Clean and Fair Elections. We fight for electoral reform since 5 years ago, and we have had 2 or 3 rallies to demand for electoral reform, and the government responded by sending police to crack down on us. In July 9 last year, we had Bersih 2.0 rally. The government arrested as many as 200 people in the month running up to the rally, in the hope that this would actually deter people from attending. At the same time, some ultra-right groups affiliated to the ruling coalitions issued threats that if the rally were to go on, it would end up as an ethnic riot as in the 1969 fashion. So they tried to keep everyone away from the street so that the government wouldn't feel all this pressure. But Malaysians, we were not known to be very brave, but I think that they have crossed the line. So on that day last year, as many as 50,000 of us actually defied the police order. We flood into the town center. Most of us get, either fired with tear gas or water cannon, or some even get beaten up and so on. At the end of the day, the police made 1,667 arrests in a single day. But they failed to break our spirit. This year, on April 28, we had Bersih 3.0 rally again, and the numbers snowballed into 250,000. At the end, most part of it was peaceful. At the end, the police cracked down again, caused some violent conflict and so on, and they tried to deter us, they try to defame us, slander us by saying that this bunch of people called Bersih are troublemakers. They are foreign agents. They want to bring this country into stability so that this country will be controlled by others, blah blah blah, and so on. But fortunately, most Malaysians are waking up. They know this is not true, so we have enjoyed greater and greater support. While election corruptions are happening by every day, we find many ridiculous instances of fraud on the electoral and so on. At the same time, you also find more and more Malaysians standing up to be counted, to defend their country. I think this is a wonderful thing. I was in the Bersih 2.0 rally, and this is how I remember the rally. They locked down the city, only to lock us into solidarity. They fired tear gas at us, only to crush our fear. We went to the street to look for democracy, only to find our country. What I mean was that we were told to stay out from politics because the government say we are a multi-ethnic society, multi-religious society, therefore we cannot afford and we don't deserve to have too much freedom, otherwise we'll abuse the freedom, we'll kill each other and so on. So we have this general distrust of people. But last year on July 9, when we went to the street, when the police cracked down on us, Malaysians, regardless of their ethno-religious background, would just pull the next person to safety. We give each other shelter. We help each other to run away. And on that ground, many Malaysians realize and say, hey, we are not enemy to each other. It's the government and the police that abuse their power that are our enemy. We as a people, we can love each other. I think that was a fantastic experience. That's why I say that we went to the street to look for democracy, only to find our country. Because before that, Malaysia to many people was a mere legal entity. It exists on your passport, on the banknotes you use, but it's not something that everyone share and say a common sense of nationhood, because people do have different opinion. For example, many Malay Muslims would think that we want more state control because they're beneficiaries of the Bumiputra, and then the non-Muslim, the non-Bumiputra, repeat again. For example, many Bumiputra would defend the Bumiputraism policy because they happen to be the beneficiary, and the ethnic minority would oppose that and think that they have become the victims of such policy. So we don't share a lot of common things, and that was part of the reason why we have so much of distrust. But on that day when we went to the street, when you were actually fighting, running for your life, and the next person would actually, pull your hand or whatsoever, or hand over towel or sword when you when you attack with tear gas, you realize that we are just human beings. We are each other's partner rather than enemies. So that helped us to break down the distrust. It rather highlight, it enlightened us that the problem is not the people. It's a government that refused to respect the people's right, refused to listen to the people's aspiration.
Now you spoke about the impersonation. Don't they check the IDs of those people who impersonates, or are the IDs are actually fraud?
You have both cases, because there are allegations that some of the electoral clerks, they are part of the game, so they would actually pretend to look at the IC, which may not be true, and they will read out the names, and so these people get away. Because the party agents would be far away, they would not be able to test this. But also in many cases, especially in the state of Sabah, there have been allegations that the Department of National Registration had worked hand in hand with the Election Commission to issue fake IC to foreigners, who then would use the fake IC to register themselves as voters.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, could you also explain to us right now, as we move forward, the key actors of the parties involved, the political parties involved in Malaysia?
Right.
And because it seems to be that there are plenty of them right now in the market.
Yeah.
And so, could you give us some insights in the historical background of each of those parties?
Right. Okay. On the ruling government, the ruling coalition side, the ruling coalition, first of all, the ruling coalition is called Barisan Nasional. It consists of 13 parties. The largest party is called United Malay National Organization, or UMNO. It was the most powerful party at the time of Malaya independence. It joined force with a Chinese party and an Indian party to come together. Over time, it co-opted other parties and now become Barisan Nasional. Now, on the opposition side, you have three parties, three major parties now. One of them is a multi-ethnic party led by former Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who is supposed to take a centrist position on many issues. Then you have an Islamist opposition party called PAS, and you have a non-Malay based theoretically multi-ethnic secular party called Democratic Action Party, DAP. So you have three parties, and these are the parties who contest on most of the states, most of the parliamentary seats. But in East Malaysia, you have other regional parties as well. One of them, like for example, Sarawak National Party (SNAP). You have you have Star State Reform Party and so on.
Now, what kind of challenges do you foresee for each of these states?
I'm sorry. Hi.